In 1993, Pot Noodle released this, an advert which reportedly caused 3 people to have epileptic seizures. And after that, the UK came up with a load of rules that were designed to prevent anything like that from ever happening again. But in 2024, the mobile network O2 released another advert, which again reportedly caused people to have epileptic seizures. So what the hell happened? How did this problem that we thought we'd solved seemingly get unsolved again? Let's start by looking at that Pot Noodle advert. So it's called Computer Graphic and it stars Phil Hartman, who is best known in the UK as the voice of Troy McClure in The Simpsons. And I can show you it up until the point that it becomes dangerous.
What goes better with an intense snack than intense film? Eat this, watch this, Louis, kick it.
Right, to make sure the next part is safe, I'm gonna massively slow it down and make it smaller on the screen. So this is what happens next. So clearly photosensitive epilepsy was not even part of the conversation at this time, because this is so far over the line that it almost looks like what you would come up with if you were trying to trigger seizures. And it did. After 3 reports of seizures, this advert was taken off the air. Of course, these days you see epilepsy warnings pretty often. You see them a lot of times when you start up a video game, you hear about them on TV. So people are more aware of the idea that flashing lights can be a problem. But that's how I got onto this in the first place, because my last video was about lighthouses and specifically about the different ways that they can flash. And in the video, I demonstrated that by pointing a bright light at the camera and sort of flashing it. But when I was editing that video, I realized that that might be a problem, so I put a warning on screen immediately before that part of the video. But how do I know that that warning was actually needed? And how do I know that the rest of the video was safe? I don't really. I wanted to make sure that I did the right thing. So I went looking. I thought there's probably a bunch of rules around this stuff and some tests that you can run on the video or something like that. And there are. After the Pot Noodle ad, British TV started using the Harding test, which was based on research that had been done since the 70s, and it was designed to identify the types of flashes that could cause problems for people with photosensitive epilepsy. So I looked around for a way to test my video against the Harding test. I assumed, since it's been around for so long, it probably wouldn't be that hard. There'd probably be some free software out there or some simple way to do it. But no, it turns out the recommended way to check a piece of video against the Harding test is to submit it to hardingtest.com, a website which is run by a private company. And as soon as you upload a video file, they run all the tests and give you a result within a few minutes. But you do have to pay a fee, which varies depending on how long the piece of video is. Apparently this is because in the proper TV industry, you need to be able to show that your content has been checked by a reputable organization, because otherwise anyone could show up and claim that they've done all the tests and you'd have no way of verifying it. But anyway, this was the recommended way to do it. So I submitted my video to hardingtest.com and about 10 minutes later I got my result. And the result came back as a failure, which is what I expected. That's why I put a warning on that part of the video. But what I was interested in was the report that they give you, because that will tell you exactly which parts of the video caused it to fail the test. And I was really hoping that it would only flag that part of the video that I put the warning on. So I had a look at the report and it said that there was only one part of the video that caused it to fail the test, and the part that caused it to fail was this. Yeah, it didn't flag the bit where I shine a bright light at the screen, it just flagged the bit where there's some text and then a bit of yellow fades in. At this point I realized I must not actually know that much about photosensitive epilepsy then. So I got in touch with Epilepsy Action, which is one of the big charities in the UK that works with people who have epilepsy.
Most people think that epilepsy is just about flashing lights and falling over. And actually epilepsy affects lots more people than that. About 3.5% of people with epilepsy are photosensitive, but people develop epilepsy, they're not entirely sure what their triggers are, because there isn't really a sort of clinically provable way of taking somebody through all the different trigger types that could exist and then giving them a document that says these are your triggers.
I didn't know that photosensitive epilepsy can be triggered by certain types of static pattern. But yeah, the Harding test says that certain patterns which mix light and dark can become triggers, although they would only fail the test if they are a certain size and brightness or if there was animation. I was starting to see how writing these standards was not as straightforward as I thought it would be. But I was still wondering why the test didn't flag the part of the video where I point a bright light at the screen. Maybe the light wasn't bright enough, or did I not flash it enough times for it to become a problem? It's hard to work out where to set the bar with these kinds of things. And often when we write these standards, we're writing them to prevent a repeat of things that have happened in the past. But if you had an incident that was even worse than the Pot Noodle advert, you might come up with a standard that's even more strict than the one that we use in the UK. And that is pretty much what happened in Japan. And they have a test that some people in the UK think that we should be using instead. Japan's incident with photosensitive epilepsy is more famous, so maybe you've already heard of it, but in 1997 there was an episode of Pokemon where Pikachu uses a thunderbolt attack to destroy some missiles. And first of all, I should note, researchers found that seizures can be triggered when there are anywhere between 3 and 65 bright flashes per second. And we also know that for some reason there is a particularly high chance of triggering a seizure when a flash involves the color red. So in this Pokemon episode, the missiles explode and they use an effect where the entire screen changes from pure red to pure blue 24 times a second. Probably one of the worst things you could possibly do in terms of photosensitive epilepsy. After the episode aired, almost 700 people were taken to hospital, most of them children, and all of them recovered ultimately, but this was a big national incident, and so afterwards there was a lot of pressure to come up with a very strict test to make sure this could never happen again. And Epilepsy Action says that the Japanese test is better than the one we use in the UK and that we should be using it instead. So I ran my video through the Japanese test, which you can do using the same website, although I did have to pay the fee again. And it came back as another failure, but this time it didn't flag the static pattern, and it did flag the bit where I turned the torch on, which is what I originally expected. So this is a bit confusing for me because I've now got 2 tests that are telling me to worry about different parts of the video. And to make things worse, these are not the only tests out there. There are at least 3 other tests that are commonly used. One of them is from the International Telecommunication Union. It's the test that's most recently been updated, and it's the one that's used by Netflix. So I thought, okay, I want to see what the Netflix certified test says about my video. But to do that, I had to download one of the Netflix certified software options, none of which are free, and I had to buy a 1-month subscription for the one that I went with. And when I finally ran my video through the test, it came back and told me that it had passed. There were a few warnings about different static patterns that were getting close to breaching the threshold for that particular test, but it didn't flag any of the flashing lights at all, and it told me that I was fine to release this. So what the hell is going on? There's not that many people who would even know all of the differences between these tests and how they all work, but I had found this one paper that compares all of the different tests. So I reached out to one of the authors of that paper.
Some of the standards have static patterns written in them. Your eyes respond to very high contrast stripes. It takes more energy to do that. You might look at a grating and you might see kind of an illusion where it's shifting around, the colors moving, things like that. There might be shimmering. Those kinds of optical illusions are an indication that your brain is working extra hard. And so it builds up an electrical storm and a pattern in the brain, and then it sets off a seizure potentially. My suspicion is it's actually all of the lines taken together, including the ones that have the blur applied to it. Classically, the problem is really strong contrast and lines, but I believe that the detection algorithm that they use doesn't require as strong of a contrast. And so I think they're being extra cautious, but there are a number of lines on the screen. The flashing failed the Japanese standard and it passed the UK one. And so the reason for that particular failure is because of the Japanese one having kind of different domains of flashing, and that if it's something considered a scene change, that you are allowed many fewer of those per second.
This is why the Japanese test flagged the bit where I turn on the torch. I didn't have more than 3 flashes per second, but maybe I did cause the overall screen brightness to change quite quickly. But there's a big problem with all of this because you can't really say whether a flash on a screen would be harmful or not unless you know how someone is going to be watching that screen. And when they originally wrote these tests, they made a bunch of assumptions about that, and those were pretty safe assumptions to make. But that was in the 90s. A flash that only takes up a small part of a TV screen might be massive when it's on a phone that someone's holding up to their face in bed. So coming up with these standards has become a lot harder. That's not to say they aren't working. They do still catch a lot of the things that might potentially cause issues, but there are just a lot more edge cases now than there used to be. But even aside from all of that, I think these tests might be flawed in a more fundamental way. In 2024, O2 released this advert which shows people going to a concert, and within the first few seconds there are some pretty intense flashing lights. But this advert passed the Harding test, and I confirmed that myself by submitting it to hardingtest.com. But when this advert came out, a lot of people with epilepsy said that it made them really uncomfortable, and there were some reports that it caused seizures. My theory was that it might have passed the Harding test because of the rolling shutter effect. So this is where cameras these days often don't capture the image all at once. Instead, they capture it in a sort of rolling way. And that's why the flash will appear in one frame at the top and the other frame at the bottom. But as a result, maybe it's the case that there's never quite 25% of the screen area flashing, and so it could slip through the net in that way. So to test this, I did a quick edit to remove the rolling shutter effect. I basically took the top half of certain frames and synced them to the bottom half of other frames so that now the entire image would flash on and off. And I submitted that to hardingtest.com and it failed. But then I thought, well, I suppose there's a small chance that when I ran the video through my editing software, some kind of change was made to like the brightness or even just the compression of the video or something that affected the outcome of the test. So I decided I would just take the advert, run it through my video editing software, export it out, and submit that to hardingtest.com just to make sure that that would still pass. So I did that and it failed, which makes no sense to me because the video looks completely identical to the original version. So I have no idea why it passes in one case and fails in the other. I also wanted to check the advert against the Japanese test, so I did that using hardingtest.com, and it identified the flashing at the start of the advert and failed. But that software that I downloaded, that Netflix certified software, can also test to the Japanese standard. So I ran the advert through that software and tested it against the Japanese standard. And this time, it had no problem with the flashes at the start of the advert. It identified some flashes later on, but that intense period of flashing right at the start of the advert, it said was okay. So it seems like for a lot of these tests, the result can be changed based on things like the video export settings you use or what particular software you're testing with, which doesn't seem quite right. But even if that wasn't the case, I'm a person who makes video for the internet, and in my quest to avoid triggering photoepileptic seizures, I've had to spend a bunch of money, I've had to do a lot of research, and I still don't really know which particular test I should be using and ultimately what is or is not safe to put in any particular video. So this really seems like an area where we could do with getting some clever people to sit down and come up with a solution here, because it just seems like this whole testing situation has not quite kept pace with the ways that people are making and watching videos these days.
Everybody in this country can learn seizure first aid in 90 seconds. And if you learn seizure first aid, you could be the person in front of somebody who has epilepsy, who has a seizure, and you could literally save their life. So I'd implore anybody to rather than being scared of epilepsy, be one of the courageous people who's there to help that person when they really need it.